Hello friends, you all know me. Let me introduce someone new to you. This is Tatiana. Tatiana is a realtor from Herceg Novi, and actually for many years I've been thinking about making a video with a realtor. But since at one time I was involved in real estate myself, not just for a short while, but for quite a long time, basically filming my own competitor felt a bit off. But for the past 2 years, I've completely switched to accounting in all the companies. Therefore, there is nothing stopping me from hiring a realtor now. So let me introduce you to the realtor, and I have a few questions for Tatiana. By the way, you can see her phone number on the screen. If you have any questions about buying or renting real estate, it's better to contact her directly. Don't handle those matters. Tanya, my first question is, from which countries are foreigners most actively buying real estate in Montenegro? I understand that you mainly work with Russians, but still you're immersed in this field. So what other foreigners from which countries actually come here to buy?
Hello. I would say that the Russian-speaking part of our planet continues to actively buy real estate. Probably she's in first place now, after all. In second place, I would say, are the Germans. They come here and buy houses and apartments very actively. There are also many people coming from Serbia to buy property. Herceg Novi is, to some extent, a pro-Serbian city. Well, there are also quite a few French people. Americans come as well. So right now, there are definitely more Europeans.
Probably the most pressing question for everyone is, how much does real estate actually cost in Montenegro? Of course, it's a bit more complicated to compare resale properties. Let's start with new developments. A new building of good quality, not 4 million areas, not Porto Novi, not Lustica Bay. Just an ordinary good new building, let's say, with standard infrastructure. Roughly, what is the price range per square meter and what does it depend on? Does the price also depend on the location, Badva, Herceg Novi, or Tivat? Is there a difference in prices?
Let me clarify right away. I mainly work in Herceg Novi. So most of what I say will mainly concern Herceg Novi. I do have reliable partners in other cities in Montenegro whom we can turn to, and they can handle transactions themselves or buy property for you, help you choose. As for Herceg Novi and the nearby suburbs, the cost of new housing, we're talking about quality, new, decent, respectable housing that is no more than 300 meters, let's say, from the sea.
Well, about 300, 500?
300, 300, 400, 500 meters. Yes, that's about 3,500 to 4,000 per square meter. That's the price for new housing. So these are modern complexes, high quality, with insulated facades, underfloor heating, swimming pools, parking lots, and so on. The price range is like this, starting from around 4,000.
Tanya, could you please talk about the price trends for new developments? Of course, I could talk about this myself, but you're the one who deals with this more professionally. I think it's better to hear from you. So the price trends for new builds, you just mentioned that this year new builds cost roughly from 3,500 to 4,000 and up, but I think there still aren't many options above that. Mostly it's 3,500 to 4. But what has the trend been like? How much did real estate cost a year ago, 2 years ago? Well, let's say over the last, for example, 3 or 4 years.
Let me put it this way. About 5 or 6 years ago, new builds of more or less decent quality, let's say, in complexes with swimming pools cost around 1,800 to 2,000 per square meter. So in reality, over the past 5 or 6 years, real estate prices have doubled. And for as long as I've been working here, property prices have been rising. In other words, it's been steady, confident growth. There was a slight stagnation during the COVID period, but the market bounced back very quickly. When the borders reopened, prices shot up sharply. A lot of buyers came from Europe and from our countries as well. And that's why I believe there's only growth ahead.
You just said basically what I've always mentioned in my videos, that prices have almost doubled over the past few years. Tell me, please, what do you think awaits the market? Will there be another wild price surge in a year or two, or on the contrary, will the market pull back and see some price drops like what happened in 2008?
Of course, it's difficult to make predictions, but for now I don't see any objective reasons for real estate prices to go down. Again, we're talking about Herceg Novi because the interest keeps growing every year. there are more and more buyers, and basically the price growth here doesn't seem to care about anything else.
Well, I think so too, because mainly real estate, in my opinion, though, this is just my personal assumption. Of course, many factors have played a role. Inflation and the rise in wages around the world, in particular, wages in Montenegro have increased significantly. But also considering that the euro and the dollar are constantly depreciating now, that is inflation in the eurozone is just terribly state seems to be probably the only reliable investment option where you buy it and know that at the very least it won't lose value. The prices for new builds are clear. As for the secondary real estate market, what are the approximate price ranges? Let's say secondary real estate of about the same quality as a new build. Of course, it's not brand new anymore. Building might be 5 or 6 years old, for example. Maybe it needs some minor cosmetic repairs. But on the other hand, it's already furnished. So are prices about the same as new builds or are they cheaper? So within what range?
Prices for secondary housing are, of course, lower. And in principle, the building that's 3 to 5 years old is still quite new, so to speak. You could say it's practically new. If we're talking about somewhat older buildings, say 20 or even 25 years old, then their price starts from 2,000 euros per square meter. Again, we're talking about more or less decent housing. We're not talking about basements or places with damp leaking walls and so on. We're talking about respectable, more or less normal housing. That 2,000 per square meter would be for a place that needs some cosmetic repairs, let's put it that way. That is, it's not modern. And if we're talking about the center of Herceg Novi, then even for older housing, the price will be around 3,000 per square meter.
Well, the center, of course, everything there is historic and all that.
Yes.
You've probably, I'm sure you've heard this. Someone comes and says, I don't want an apartment, I want a little house. With apartments, it's more or less, if we're talking about the good quality apartments we've been discussing, it's more or less easy to say how much they cost. With houses, in my opinion, it's much more complicated because the price range is huge and the quality varies a lot as well. Can you somehow describe roughly what price you can buy a house for?
It depends on what you're looking for. Either you want a turnkey house where you don't need to do anything at all, that will cost, I don't know, I think around 300,000. That's it. Or if you just want to buy some walls, so to speak, basically, just a plot of land with water and electricity connections, then it can be cheaper. For example, right now I have a house for sale, the very cheapest one, 61,038 square meters. So it's really small, that's the minimum price. But it has all the paperwork, everything is legal, everything is fine. So that's the price for such a small area.
Here's a very interesting question. It's asked all the time because many people come here wanting to buy property, but they don't have enough money. We will now ask the owner for an installment plan. So I'd like you to explain to people, first of all, what is the difference between installment plan and a loan, how long you can get an installment plan for in Montenegro, and do you have any experience where a foreigner was given a loan to buy property?
Well, a loan is when you go to a financial institution and borrow money at interest. So roughly speaking, you go to the bank and take out a loan. For foreigners in Montenegro, this is practically impossible. There are some nuances, like you can get a loan secured by land and so on. But for an ordinary person, that's just not a realistic option. So you shouldn't count on getting a loan or a mortgage in Montenegro. To be continued. Installment payments. Installment plans are becoming less and less common every year because prices are changing very quickly. People want to get their money right away, they want to invest it somewhere and so on. That's why installment plans are less common, but they still exist, and usually it's for a year, an installment plan for 1 year. So you arrive, pay 50 or 70% of the price of the apartment or house, and then over the course of a year you settle the remaining amount. This is possible.
Briefly, tell us how a real estate transaction is processed in Montenegro and whether you need a lawyer's assistance. I understand that both realtors and the notary conduct a basic check, but it mainly consists of verifying property ownership. In other words, realtors usually don't dig much deeper than that. If I'm wrong, please correct me. In what cases do you recommend hiring a lawyer for detailed support during the transaction?
Well, for any property purchase in Montenegro, I would recommend starting by going to a real estate agency. That is, you choose an agency that will save you from a lot of trouble. The notary really only checks the property ownership certificate, that's it. But all reputable agencies conduct both checks and comprehensive support.
So you also conduct a comprehensive check?
Yes. Of course, we do everything just like lawyers do, we check everything. That's it. The only thing is, you see, when we take properties for sale, we check them.
Wait a second, sorry to interrupt you. So are you saying that basically a lawyer isn't really needed anymore? So a realtor can do all of this if the realtor is experienced enough?
Yes, of course, absolutely. A realtor can easily replace you in this case. When I bought my property for the first time, I hired a lawyer, but honestly, I realized there was no real need for it. It was just for peace of mind.
What can you say about the risks of buying property that is still in the process of legalization? You've probably heard these kinds of questions a lot. They get asked all the time. Like, the documents for legalization have been submitted. Usually sellers tell buyers, yes, the house isn't legalized or the apartment isn't legalized, but we've already submitted the documents, so everything will be fine. So tell me, what risk does a person face when buying this kind of property?
The risks here are 50-50. Either you'll get lucky or you won't. That's why it's better to buy legalized property.
I've always advised everyone the same thing because there's a saying, a miser pays twice. It's true, you can buy illegal property, but what happens next no one knows, whether it gets legalized or not. It's a very complicated process. I think we can wrap up the topic of buying. Basically, we've already discussed all the main points. Tell me, please, for example, what's the price to rent an apartment specifically in Herceg Novi? Let's say, for example, we have 3 people arriving. One needs a studio, the second needs a 1-bedroom apartment, and the third needs a large 3-room apartment that is with 2 bedrooms. If we're talking about decent options, not luxury, but respectable choices, what would be the price for them to rent these 3 types of apartments? A studio, a 1-bedroom, and a 2-bedroom.
If we're talking about, let's say, average, decent housing, quite respectable, then a studio in Herceg Novi for long-term rent, meaning for a year, will cost 350 to 400 euros. If it's a 1-bedroom apartment, that will start from 450 euros. For a 2-bedroom, you can find options starting from 600.
By the way, regarding long-term rentals, prices are dropping, and the number of listings on the market, well, since there are fewer foreigners now, many have left, not just Montenegro. In all visa-free countries for Russians, there's the same trend. After the start of the so-called special military operation, a lot of people arrived. Then, once the initial fears subsided, many probably went back or moved on somewhere else. And because of this, prices have dropped somewhat. Is the number of available listings decreasing as well? Like it was before, even before the pandemic, when prices were very low, but at the same time, very few people were willing to rent out long term. Everyone wanted to rent to tourists. Is that trend coming back, or have prices just dropped while the number of listings has stayed high?
Prices really have gone down significantly now. They've returned to some more or less reasonable numbers. There's a certain trend here. Not only did a lot of people come and rent everything out, but a lot of properties that were previously for short-term rent have switched to long-term rentals. Also, many of the people who arrived bought some real estate, and again, they rented it out. So there are more apartments available now. At the moment, there is a choice. There are apartments, and the prices are more or less reasonable. But now, again, the season is approaching, and I can already see that property owners are starting to raise prices.
We have a new law under consideration. It's been discussed for a long time. You probably know about the law on licensing real estate activities. For realtors, in principle, there's nothing particularly alarming in it. Are you sure that all realtors will get a license? Of course, it will take a bit of running around, but it's a solvable issue. Tell me, please, what does this law promise for buyers? Are there any complications for them? For example, will they be required to hire a realtor, or can they still choose between buying from a realtor or buying from anyone they want?
Well, as far as I know, the law hasn't been passed yet. And so there's no provision that a person must buy specifically through a real estate agency. But in principle, like in the entire civilized world, I think it will come to that. Moreover, I believe that buying through a real estate agency is actually a benefit for the buyer, because here, if you're a foreigner and you don't know the language, it's very difficult to check the property and to handle all the paperwork correctly. All real estate agencies handle this and provide a comprehensive service accompanying you through the entire transaction. So it's safer this way. You won't lose your money and you won't end up paying someone else's debts. The real estate agency will take care of everything and handle all the paperwork.
Tanya, thank you very much for the conversation. Guys, if you have any questions about buying or selling real estate, write to Tanya. Her contact information is in the description of this video. And also at the beginning of the video, you saw a phone number on a screen. She is based in Herceg Novi. By the way, do you work only in Herceg Novi or in other regions as well?
Mainly in Herceg Novi.
Tanya mainly works in Herceg Novi, which makes sense since she lives here herself. For any questions, write to her. As always, you can contact me with questions about opening or closing companies, obtaining residence permits or accounting services. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.